For more on this, Peter Mumford joins us live. He is the practice head for Southeast Asia at the Eurasia Group. So, Peter, what's your take on what's going on behind the scenes? Why has the House Speaker delayed tomorrow's vote?
Thanks very much for having me on today. So, the situation in Thailand is very messy, at least in terms of the procedural outlook. Nominally, tomorrow's vote has been delayed indefinitely because of this issue of the Office of the Ombudsman forwarding this case to the Constitutional Court, arguing that the sort of vote to not have a vote last week on Peter's renomination, if you like, was unconstitutional. Now, I think that's the official reason for tomorrow's vote being delayed. In reality, I think it was always very unlikely that a vote would take place tomorrow because coalition negotiations are still ongoing, and really no candidate wants to step forward and be nominated for the premiership until they think they have a reasonable chance of getting to the 375 required out of 749. And that's the precedent set, if you like, by Peter not being able to be renominated. Candidates feel they probably only have one shot at this going forward.
Peter, in the bigger picture, what does all of this tell us about the vulnerability of the pro-democracy bloc?
Yeah, so regardless of what happens with this case to the Constitutional Court on Peter's renomination, it's very unlikely that Peter will become Prime Minister, even if he can be renominated. What's going on now really is, I think, the long anticipated and messy divorce of the two big if you want, pro-democracy, for want of a better term, parties, Move Forward and Pure Thai. And I think, Pure Thai wants Move Forward to back away voluntarily so Pure Thai can look at other possible government formations. But Move Forward, cognizant of its sort of popularity and wanting to bolster its popularity, is really trying to force Pure Thai to wield the knife and make the decision itself. And that's one of the key dynamics that's playing out right now and why it's all very messy. I think the other important dynamic is the establishment is very united in not wanting to see Move Forward in power. However, the establishment's quite divided on what the best alternative is. Should the Conservative parties form a pact with Pure Thai, or should they try and go it alone, even if that means a sort of messy minority government, at least at first?
So with all the mess that's happening right now, we do know that Pure Thai has a chance at forming that coalition government. It's courting parties from the Conservative camp, as you mentioned. So what is the likelihood that Move Forward could become the opposition?
We think it's likely, if not very likely, that Move Forward will go into opposition. The most likely outcome from our view, and I think we've held this view since the election really, is that we will have a Conservative-dominated government, by which we mean either a Pure Thai Conservative pact or we have a sort of minority government. But in this scenario, even if it's a Pure Thai Prime Minister, it will be one that is supported by several Conservative parties and will be heavily restrained by both those parties and the institutional frameworks in terms of what they can do. So if you like, it would be a Pure Thai Prime Minister who is in effect leading a Conservative government. And from an investor point of view, that really means there's broad policy continuity, whether it's a Pure Thai Prime Minister, whether it's Prawit Wongsuwan from Palang Pracharath, or someone else who's heading that government. Really, the policy outlook is similar.
And one last question, Peter. What sort of reaction are you expecting from Thais, given that there were some small protests following the previous failed votes?
Yeah, if anything, maybe the protests so far have been slightly smaller than might have been expected after Peter failed to become Prime Minister. But we're still not at the point where it's confirmed, if it ends up being confirmed as we suspect, that Move Forward is not only missing out on the premiership, but missing out on power altogether. So that's the first thing. At that point, once Pure Thai goes and forms a new government with the Conservatives, or we have a Conservative minority, the protests could grow. The other point is, if Pure Thai could also end up being excluded from power, if we end up in a sort of Conservative minority government situation, if that happens, with both Move Forward and Pure Thai supporters could be on the street. So we would see, bigger protesters. I think the other thing that's important to note is that, the long-term future or future forward is looking in jeopardy with various court cases hanging over it. And right now, it seems we're moving towards a situation where it's quite possible, if not probable, that Future Forward will end up being dissolved, even if not in the very short term, maybe after several months later. And that will be a real flashpoint, I think, in terms of social stability.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. That was Peter Mumford, practice head for Southeast Asia at the Eurasia Group.